she would lose her status as an iconic Negro. An insistence on black responsibility is not a feature of the bargainer's mask. It offers no innocence to whites, no benefit of the doubt. It doesn't flatter them or give them an opportunity to experience their own decency against their race's reputation for racism. It asks for no gratitude. By definition, black responsibility is a disengagement from the idea that whites are crucial to black uplift. In this way, it abandons whites in their longing for racial innocence and restored moral authority. It leaves them, as it were, to flap in the breeze. And in this circumstance, they would have no reason to imbue Oprah with a special allure. Worse, by advocating for black responsibility, Oprah would be taking a stand that stigmatizes whites as racist. Whites cannot simply demand that blacks take responsibility for their own problems without coming off as victim-blaming racists. In other words, if whites followed Oprah in her commitment to black responsibility, they would lose innocence rather than gain it. Suddenly, Oprah would be a liability, a weight, a barrier to their innocence. So, then that wonderful reciprocity that bargainers have with whites would break down. There would be no synergy, no escalation of gratitude and goodwill. A strong and clear commitment to black responsibility would likely not cause Oprah to become a despised figure. However, she would be shorn of that extra specialness that bargaining generates. Given her talent and charm, she would no doubt still be quite successful, but iconic status would elude her. Pretty much all of this has happened, in reality, to the great comedian Bill Cosby. Once every bit the iconic Negro that Oprah is today, Cosby in recent years has made the argument for black responsibility more prominently than anyone since, yes, Malcolm X, who was a fierce advocate of black self-help back in the 60s. Cosby presses for the self-help without the black nationalism, and he travels from city to city staging call-outs in which he challenges inner-city blacks to take charge of their families and to raise their children with values and purpose. In Cincinnati, to make his point, he had the local coroner, a black doctor, come on stage to describe in graphic detail what happens to a human body when it is shot. On television, we see such bodies discreetly covered with a tarpaulin, but the coroner describes to the audience what he finds when he removes that tarpaulin and examines the actual body. In the course of description, his own emotions break through. His eyes water as he describes finding one young black male after another under those tarpaulins. Cosby brings on stage the mothers of teenagers killed in the endless roundelay of gang violence. He brings up people who suffered sexual abuse as children, people who lost themselves to drugs, and girls who all but destroyed their lives with teenage pregnancies. He asks people to tell their story, to testify, and to describe to the audience how they stood up to these problems. Underlying this combination of shock therapy and testimony is the theme of individual responsibility. But it is not something that has to be preached. He believes that the people who face up to their problems and make progress against them are the best experts and teachers. Well, Bill Cosby is no doubt doing God's work in all of this, but it has cost him. Clearly, this effort breaks the discipline of the bargainer's mask that gave him iconic status in his Cosby Show days. This work represents a disengagement from the idea of black uplift through white guilt, so it leaves him no way to offer innocence or flattery to whites or to receive gratitude from them. And whites cannot follow him in this focus on black individual responsibility without risking the racist stigma. So he is now something of a liability, even to whites who privately admire his call-outs and who were proud to be fans of The Cosby Show. He is now a risk to their innocence, rather than a source of it. Cosby is still one of the greatest comedians of his time, and people will always pay to see him perform. But he broke discipline with the bargainer's mask by revealing himself to be a deeper and stronger man than the brilliant bargainer we had always known. This disrupted the easy reciprocity he once had with the American public. He is no longer an iconic Negro. He no longer sells Jell-O or anything else on national television. Bill Cosby gave up his iconic status to be free of the disciplines of bargaining, to speak as he truly felt without regard to his reciprocity with white America. He literally said at an NAACP meeting, "I don't care what white people think," thereby removing his mask in public. The first binding reality for Barack Obama is that his political cachet is tied to his status as an iconic Negro. If he goes the way of Cosby, he loses actual political capital. He might well survive such a move, but the rock star specialness would be gone. White Americans would no longer see the possibility of their own racial innocence in him. So the disciplines of bargaining are a basic element of Obama's politics. He labors to sell himself as an optimistic sign from the racial front, as the harbinger of a new America in which old divisions of ideology and race are transcended. Here, against the shame of America's racial past, he may hope to look a bit messianic. As one fan put it at a recent rally in Reno, Nevada, he is the guy America is waiting for. So you don't vote for Obama merely because of his policy positions on health care and school subsidies. He is an opportunity to vote for American redemption. Bargainers nurture a degree of invisibility about themselves because they want nothing visible that could break off their reciprocity with whites. Oprah may occasionally endorse a candidate. She endorses Obama. But she does not spell out her political convictions, and she certainly does not belabor them as Phil Donahue once did. Iconic Negroes try for political invincibility, and, failing this, they lean vaguely toward the political left. Why? Because on the political left, blacks are still seen as victims. If blacks are not victims of white racism, if their problems stem from pathologies only remotely related to past racism, if, in fact, more black responsibility is the only meaningful answer to black difficulty, then whites begin to disengage from the idea that their solicitude brings black advancement. Suddenly, they don't need so much of the innocence that bargainers offer them. So bargainers lean toward the political left, where the focus is on white responsibility for black difficulty. Barack Obama is bound to the anti-responsibility political left because his political fate depends on his ability to offer innocence to whites. This despite the fact that he clearly seems to accept the importance of individual responsibility in social reform. For his own mother, apparently, responsibility was a rigid creed. He says of her, "The idea that my survival depended on luck remained a heresy to her. She insisted on assigning responsibility." Yet he offers no thinking on how to build incentives to responsibility into actual social policy. The scenarios he paints to justify his broad policy directions always return us to the idea of the victim. He thinks of the many fatherless young black males on the south side of Chicago and sees their last best hope in school reform.